I want to say a little more than a month ago, we gathered to answer a couple of seemingly straightforward questions. And first, how do we foster Guam's young bed and breakfast industry while being respectful and responsible to the neighborhoods in which they reside? Number two is how do we ensure the safety of our visitors and the quality of the Guam visitor experience? Three, how should Guam law differentiate between bed and breakfast homes and the short-term vacation units popularized by online brokerage sites like Airbnb and Turnkey? And then four, how do we ensure that Guam's tax and business laws are properly enforced for both traditional B&Bs and vacation rentals? After weeks of work, the Committee on Housing, Tourism, and Municipal Affairs submits for your review and discussions our best efforts at answering these important questions. While we review and discuss each proposal in detail, I want to make a few things clear first. These policies are draft proposals only. I will need your help, your hard work, and experience to ensure that these laws strike the right balance between supporting small business owners, being good neighbors, and keeping our visitors safe. While I don't expect us to agree on everything all of the time, I want to assure you that none of these policies will move forward until each of you has had the opportunity to recommend better language or offer a better way. And if there's any ideas out there, please don't hesitate to share it with us. Everyone here, everyone watching at home will have the opportunity to review our amended proposals before they are introduced. And I am committed to as many roundtable discussions as are necessary to achieve consensus. This is very important to Guam, and this time we have to get it done right. Our committee is very grateful for your participation in this process, and we look forward for your input today. And I know that today's discussions will stay positive and productive, and I'm happy to be working with each of you. I'm just going to ask this morning if you guys having your cell phones, if you can just put it on vibrate mode so that if anyone's speaking, it doesn't interrupt anyone talking. Also, I will open the floor to Department of Revenue and Taxation as part of the lead government agency for any comments, and then I guess we can take the bill one by one. I'll probably start. We do have 4 bills in front of us, draft bills in front of us. Does everybody have a copy? Everybody has a copy? Mr. Sablon, you have your copy? Thank you. Mr. Camacho?
Don't know me. My name is John Camacho. I'm the Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation. And during our last roundtable meeting, we did continue our enforcement in the bed and breakfast industry. Basically, we've been going out, our regulatory as well as our tax people that have been going out and verifying and basically visiting a lot of these bed and breakfast or presumably bed and breakfast rooms that are out there. So I think we accomplished a lot during these last few months, and we had some people come into our department and register as B&B, and we had all others that actually register for apartments or anything that would fit their business moving forward. So I'm glad that we were here again to continue this dialogue on the bed and breakfast. And although I didn't really have a chance, and I apologize to go over these bills, but I'm going it real fast right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair, I'm sorry, joining me this morning is our Vice Chair of the Committee, Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz, and our Majority Leader, Senator Respicio Situs Masi, for coming this morning. Any opening statements? If not, okay. Anybody would like to make any opening comments before we go in through each bill? What I'd like to do is take each bill as I have in front of me, give you just a little summary, and then we can talk about that if there's any issues and concern. I do know that Mr. Moranaga from GVB is here also as a property owner of PHR. Do you have any opening comments, sir?
On this bill, I already have some comments on this bill that I think that we need to
Okay.
have some safety net on it.
Okay.
So I'll discuss that when the subject comes up.
When the subject comes up.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, then we'll go ahead and take the first draft, which is an act to add a new section 30109, section 30110 and 30111 to Chapter 30, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to authorizing the Director of Revenue and Taxation or his designee to enter into tax collection agreements with transient accommodation brokers. Again, this draft measure authorizes the Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation to enter into tax collection agreements with online sites like Airbnb, Turnkey, and others. Under this authority, these sites would collect applicable Guam taxes on our behalf, register with the Department of Revenue and Taxation to do so, and remit such payments to DRT on a schedule determined by the agreement. The measure clearly defines the role of each entity, make them liable for the taxes they will agree to collect. It prescribes how each entity should be registered and the manner by which an agreement may be canceled. I want to share with folks here that online sites already have the same agreements that are similar to this draft are like Florida, Portland, San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, San Diego, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and Phoenix. And on this draft, I guess the questions that I wanted to work with the Department of Revenue and Taxation was based on our first roundtable that we had. The Department of Revenue and Tax believed that it would need a change to the local law in order to allow online sites like the Airbnb and others to collect taxes on our behalf. Does the department believe that the draft bill provides the authority that it requires?
Madam Chair, basically, I didn't really get a chance, but the concept of these collection of these hotel occupancy tax by the designee in such agreement that we will go back and basically look at these things, and I'm presumably looking at this as basically almost very similar to the hotels, which basically would collect for the government and hand over the occupancy tax. So I can comment later basically on this and ensure that the concept of these, once we agree with this agreement to have these brokers collect on behalf of the government and transmit those money probably the following month, just similar to the concept of the hotel, what they normally do on a monthly basis would be good, in other words.
Okay, maybe my next question to that is when we looked on the Airbnb, there are presently more than 100 Guam listings on that Airbnb alone. Can the department determine how many of these listings have a valid business license or tax identification number already?
Basically, again, we have a small portion of these things that are registered. I believe it's a lot of the when we visit these accommodations are basically claiming that they're using the daily rates rather than being basically a BMB recipients or license. But I think some of the things that we need to look at is the reconciliation between the owner of the B&B and the broker, which is actually collecting on behalf of the owners for the B&B, because basically when you have the brokers collecting and also at the same time the owner at the other side is not being represented by the brokers, then we need to reconcile and basically who's responsible for this. So this is something that we probably will need to look and see how it would work moving forward. Because if we're requiring the brokers to actually file and the owners also will be filing at the same time to report their GRT, and also likewise maybe others that are not captured by the brokers, then there's going to be probably some credits that are going to be claimed on those returns. So I would take this back and run it with my staff and take a look at it, how this would work, and if it passes into law, then we'll look at it and basically address the issues of the reconciliation part.
Okay. Now that you say that, then a couple of other questions would be, if you were to take it back, was has the department collected any hotel occupancy taxes from the Airbnb on Guam, and if so, how much would be one of the other questions that you can get an answer to? And does DRT have any estimate on the revenues lost because of the non-paying vacation rentals and B&Bs? So I'd like to add that to the questions for DRT. Or do you have anything on?
I don't have anything right now as how much is being collected under B&B, but when this thing basically was more or less like a problem out there, basically on who's registered and who's not registered, we did do a compliance review on all these registered B&B. And we do have a report on how much was collected and how much and which ones are not basically paying the hotel occupancy tax as well as the GRT tax. So from there we normally would follow through to ensure that if there's any back taxes that are due, our staff are on top of it. In other words, so I can basically come up with a report on maybe next time or submit it to you, Madam. Basically, what the report calls for and moving forward.
Yeah.
I think her first question was, have you received any payment from Airbnb? Not a B&B, but Airbnb.
I need to verify that. I can't comment on that one.
Okay.
Just for the record, if you're speaking, if you can just say your name.
Sure.
And just where you're from, and then we'll start just because, and then I'll go ahead and send a sign-in list for everybody to sign.
Sure,
Thank
sure.
you.
My name is Tay. Last name is O. I represent Lupang Apartments. Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that if you don't have a business license and you like to list on Airbnb, they withhold about 21% of the total room costs. That's my understanding. If you do have a business license, they have a service fee, which I believe is about like 2%, right? 2 to 3%. That's their service fee. I don't know what they do with the 21%. Honestly speaking, that's something to be looked into.
Anyone else would like to comment on the first draft bill? Any questions? Yeah.
Madam Chairwoman, Nathan Knight from the Guam Visitors Bureau. Was this based on the Hawaii bill that was passed for that they used?
There was based on the first roundtable and the draft templates that were sent to us by GVB and others, that we took the best on what was on.
Okay, great.
So, and then we also noted all the other states and communities that had this similar law in place.
Okay.
And from Florida, Portland, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Washington State, San Diego, Philadelphia, and Phoenix.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam.
Yes, please begin.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear what you were saying. Who collects the 20? I'm relatively new to this. The 20% and the 2%? The brokers.
Airbnb. They withhold 21% of the total room costs. This is if you don't have a business license. If you do have a business license, I believe they withhold 3%. So I really don't know what they do with the 21%. Maybe they return it back to the owners if there are no issues with the property. That's something to be looked into. But I am also aware that certain individuals will list their properties on Airbnb as a marketing tool, and then they'll do their own personal booking behind their back. So I know that goes on.
Thank you. So, I'm sorry. So, Maria Miller with GAR. So I was just wondering, I know Hawaii, at some time you had to have an ICC license in order to handle out-of-state and out-of-country money.
So, this is what this is trying to do, is to make sure that if there is any, with Airbnb and others like that, turnkey, that those companies would collect the state's or the area's tax that's due, because each state has
Right,
different
right.
tax brackets or taxes on the business, and then it gets turned into that state. So this is what this is.
Ideally, that's
yeah.
what they're supposed to pay
do.
everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanna make sure. Thank you.
That business privilege tax,
Right.
yes. Yeah,
My apologies,
that's okay.
Marvin Aguilar from the Department of Land Management.
Thank you. Yes,
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I'm just kind of confused right now. So there's an industry, there's activities out there of individuals doing business with people who don't have business licenses on Guam.
That's correct.
that's
I
Marvin.
don't know if that was vetted but that's just the point I'm getting
When
past
we had
that.
our first roundtable, there was discussions to making sure that the government makes sure that all these businesses that are doing work on Guam, that they be licensed, and that we make sure that the safety and the transactions to doing businesses on Guam were adhered to. And this is why, and because of our first roundtable, we now have 4 draft bills that we're looking at, and we're going to go through each one of them with a lot of government agencies being here. I see Rev and Tax, Land Management now. We also have Public Health that's also here, and other folks. We have the hotel and restaurant. Mr. Jackson is here, and then a lot of the key stakeholders. So, any other questions? You had questions on this
Yes.
first draft. Name, please.
My name is Dan Bradley. I'm a resident of Tumon. We are looking at getting into the B&B business. We own property here. I'm concerned that the Department of Revenue and Taxation, which is not doing this direct collection, which is, I know, being proposed for like mail order things, the items, but currently is not doing it. And my experience with Rev and Taxes, at the end of the year when I go to get my business license, 9 times out of 10, I have to bring in all my receipts for GRT because Rev and Taxes computers don't match my payments. So what I'm concerned about is if Rev and Tax collects directly from the broker, how is this going to be recorded on a monthly basis, on a timely basis? How is the payee, the actual person responsible for this money? How are they going to be notified? How are they going to be receipted? And that's where my concern is. This is a new procedure for Rev and Tax, and I just regretfully see a lot of problems reconciling everybody's payments to something like that. What my recommendation would be to continue with the existing plan. We have lots of businesses on Guam, which the Department of Revenue and Taxation is not present at the cash register. However, these companies pay GRT. Every year they have to go get licensed. Their credentials are examined. Land management has to get involved with licensing. There's a whole slew of government agencies that have to clear you every year. And one of those is Rev and Tax, actually 3 divisions of Rev and Tax. So I would suggest that instead of adding a new form of collection into this industry, which is not present in any other industry, that we continue with the process that we're using now and have used for years for all other businesses.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that brings back to my question on reconciliation, which is basically what the gentleman is saying, that if you're going to have Airbnb collect on, multiple B&B customers out there, owners out there, and take that and basically submit it to the Department of Revenue, what is the owner responsibility as far as filing their responsibility? And that would be basically, because I'm assuming thinking that not maybe everybody would go to Airbnb to register to stay at their hotel. There are probably people coming there personally and saying, I want to stay in your on your rooms, and that's becomes still the responsibility to collect and basically turn that over to the government, not only the hotel but also the GRT if it applies. In other words.
So let me state for the brokers already have a system whereby every time a stay is booked on site or online, the tax is automatically charged. This way, the actual operator has no involvement, which might require notification. This is this first draft. We already know that Airbnb and other sites are online, and that's existing. So other states have had the opportunity to work with these online sites and collect for their state that percentage.
The portion that concerns me is Guam law requires a business to file by the 20th of the following month the gross receipts tax for the previous month, whether you have income or not. The form actually has a method of payment, and they're kind of married together. I would be very concerned about filing if I don't have proof from Airbnb or God knows any other broker that they made this payment to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. When I file, do I put that it's paid? When I don't know that. Normally, the tax payer would pay that amount on the 20th of the month. If the taxpayer, like myself, doesn't do that and that responsibility goes to another entity, how are we supposed to file our returns? Do we have a receipt from Airbnb?
Well, our concern, and maybe just for clarification on my part, that without this agreement, we could say that the operators can book stays without ever notifying the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So we do know that with this online site, that everyone who books a stay from outside, booking a stay for one of the areas, the Airbnbs here, the sites here, that the 4%, that the hot will already automatically be charged through that, and then the Airbnb site will turn over to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And John, you wanted to add? Yeah.
I guess that the mechanism, if we move forward with this, basically having the brokers collect on behalf of the government, is that when they transmit the funds for the hotel occupancy tax, basically they would have to communicate, or the owners would have to communicate with the Airbnb to determine how much of that and how many of that actually were transpired in the month. And if I'm looking at the responsibility of the owner, when they report the total gross value on the return on an annual basis, on a monthly basis, they would basically maybe be allowed as a credit at the bottom of the portion of the GRT tax, which basically says that the brokers have paid this amount and not have to pay for that. In other words, that's something that maybe we're leading towards this, basically, because not only that they have to report hotel occupancy tax, but they all have to report GRT if it is applicable. In other words, there's a law that basically exempts the first 40,000. I don't know how much, but once they exceed that 40,000 for the first year, they would have to report and pay GRT. I don't know how the business is going to do well moving forward, but if they exceed the 50,000, then basically they would have to pay moving forward the GRT, whether on a monthly basis.
It would seem to me that, well, actually, my first question, since our last meeting, has anybody from Rev Tax spoken to Airbnb?
I basically, there's a lot of communication, but I really didn't get a chance to verify whether or not my staff have spoken, but I can get back to you on these issues. And
this is a very big issue,
yes.
And the Department of Revenue and Taxation needs to know how to be able to deal with Airbnb, because they have stated in all their releases in Hawaii, in their most recent announcement, signing of the agreement, that they had worked with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And all it took was for the Department of Revenue and Taxation to contact you. And all we're trying to do here is give you the authorization to do it, but you need to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that they will collect the hotel occupancy tax. You, as the owner, will be responsible for your gross receipts tax, your business privilege tax.
Okay.
So you will make the decision on whether you know whether or not you're going to cross that threshold of 40 and what you have to report every month. If Airbnb paid you $10,000 for last month, then you have to report that and pay the taxes. If they only paid you $1,000, you know you're not going to get to 40, then you make your reporting. But that's the amount of money that you've made as a result of it.
Right.
And that's all we're trying to do, is to get someone to be responsible for collecting the hotel occupancy tax, which is different from the gross receipts tax that you can handle yourself.
Yes.
And the problem that we're having is that the site for Guam already lists 100 places that you could possibly. They're not all like you're going to have them direct with you. They're going through Airbnb. And so someone has to collect that 11%, whatever that 11%. And so that's all we're trying to do, is trying to get that. The homeowner, the property owner is responsible for the BPT.
GRT.
Yeah.
That answers my question.
Thank
That
you.
clears it up.
Okay, any other? Yes, Deanna.
Deanna Palmer with Guam Realtors Association. I understand his concern, because the way their law is written is that if it's not paid, it's the owner of the unit that is penalized.
That's right.
So I understand why he's asking that question. One of the other things I noticed in the definition is that it's only single-family dwellings. And there are situations where someone would own a whole building of apartments that could be available for short-term rental. And certain condominiums may change their HPRs or their rules to allow for B&B, or for allowing the whole unit to be used as a vacation rental. So I don't see clear definition about that situation. Bed and breakfast is definitely that the owner is in the unit, but there's other short-term rentals that are happening where the family rents the whole unit with, appliances and dishes and sheets and towels, and the vacationer is the one doing the cooking. So the owner of the unit isn't providing any food.
That would be in the vacation stay rentals.
The vacation
Yeah.
stay rentals.
This is Airbnb to allow revenue tax to collect the 4%. So we're on the first draft. I'm sorry, we're on the first draft.
Well, they're also
Yes,
interrelated.
yes, yes, they are,
It's the
definitely,
one that has 30109 on the top.
yeah.
They're all drafts.
Yeah.
They're all first drafts, so it's the one with 30109.
This is about the brokers and
Yes.
the collection of the 11%.
Yeah,
Okay.
by revenue tax.
I just wanted to follow up on a question on these brokers. Are we only requiring them that they collect if the license is for B&B? Because there's a lot of businesses out there that they may be representing, and it may overlap if there's 6 rooms, it doesn't qualify for Airbnb. If it's 7 room, it doesn't qualify for Airbnb.
Yes, it does.
No,
Because
there's a
there's
limit on
separate-
Airbnb.
They're not bed. The problem is it's a misnomer. It's a semantic misnomer to call it Airbnb.
No. My question
No,
is,
Airbnb calls themselves Airbnb, but they're not the traditional B&B that some of us have stayed at, where we go and it's a 6-bedroom house. The owner stays downstairs and cooks breakfast for us. Airbnb is really vacation rental, where they have a unit where you come in and you have the unit for a week or for 2 weeks. It's not bed and breakfast in the traditional sense. It is a vacation rental for a short term. And Airbnb should collect that 11% for every single night that they have that booked as a short-term rental for that period. It's unfortunate that they took the name Airbnb because there is nobody there except to pick you up and drop you off and take you back to the airport. They don't cook for you, and they do clean for you, but they do provide you with a room with all the accommodations. But someone has to collect the 11%. So there's 2 taxes we're trying to collect: the hotel occupancy tax of 11% and the 4% for the grocery business privilege tax. The homeowner or the property owner or the condo owner, whatever, is responsible for that. What were the 4%? We're trying to find somebody who's collecting money to get the 11%, because whenever I've traveled on Airbnb, I've paid it's charged to my card. I get there, I leave, I don't have to, I've never met the owners of the places that I've stayed at. It's already paid. I get back on the plane and I'm gone. So someone has to pay the 6 or 7 nights that I was there. And that's Airbnb's responsibility.
Yeah, and Vice Speaker, if I could, this says the definition transient accommodation broker. So, Director, if you look under it has all the definitions on what that it says whole or partial payment for transient accommodations or resort timeshare vacation interest units or plans. So I think that's includes B&Bs or vacation rentals in the definition.
This is Milton Morinaga. I got a question here on this broker. So, listening now, this broker is just responsible for Airbnb money transaction to pay the tax on behalf of the owner or whatever, right? The entity. So that means that in this bill, where and other area are we going to cover? What kind of qualification do you require for this Airbnb tax collector? Like, for instance, we're going to put a regulation saying no commingling They got to be audited every year to make sure they submit their audit report, or are they going to be bonded, or are they going to be trust? I don't know. I'm just getting a little technical here, but it just because
yes,
this is
you are.
offshore guys.
The Airbnb is just like JTB.
Yeah.
Or Jata.
Yeah.
I mean, not Jata.
Yes, I understand. Right.
All the KTB. They collect all the money in Korea and in Tokyo.
Yes, but we
It
pay
never
the
showed-
taxes here when we collect at the hotel level. When we collect the money, we pay all the TNT and the GRT and everything. But they will collect the money as they sell their package. They collect the money there. We send them a bill saying, "Hey, this John Doe stay with us. JTB booking. These are the names. These are the number of nights." They say, "This is the amount you owe me." So they send us the money, and then we pay the taxes. So these guys, B&B is okay, fine. So be it. But they might do a direct booking or whatever. So we just have to make sure that that the relationship with that I'd rather use the word vacation rental, okay, because it's confusing. The vacation rental guys will say, "Hey, Mr. A, you're my B&B broker or agent, so I'll put a listing, so sell it for me," correct? And they're gonna sell it as I sold it. Here, these are the revenue you earn, so we'll send it to you. But you're asking them to submit the taxes on behalf of the owner, correct? Yeah, okay. But I just want to make sure that we're not creating another entity just strictly doing tax collection and being on behalf. That's I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
That's all.
My name is Bart Jackson. I'm with the GHRA and the Guam Visitors Bureau, and I'm a small hotel owner. And clearly, I guess the issue is we're trying to codify a relationship that doesn't exist today, and that's someone collecting occupancy taxes on behalf of someone else. Isn't that basically what we're trying to? So to give Airbnb, who is collecting money now, the legal right to collect on behalf of the different owners of units and or B&Bs. As the Vice Speaker said, there's some confusion there. A B&B is a very specific definition. A rental is a vacation rental is a different classification. But for Airbnb purposes, an Airbnb is a website. It's a company. Let's not confuse. Don't use Airbnb for anything else other than the specific company that is named Airbnb, that is in the business of selling stays in people's homes or units. That's what Airbnb is. A bed and breakfast, as the Vice Speaker said, is a different animal, as is a vacation rental. So for the purposes of this conversation, Airbnb is just one of the entities that will be given the right to collect, as they're already collecting for a number of other locales around the world, already collecting occupancy tax from those folks who choose to use that website. But this obviously is all-encompassing. All websites, all agents and brokers who rent on behalf of someone else now can create a relationship with Rev Tax and collect tax on that basis. So from the Hotel Association standpoint, we certainly are supportive, are very supportive of the effort to allow a company like Airbnb, Korean websites, shoot, if Expedia wanted to do it, I'd be happy to have Expedia pay it for me too, to allow these relationships to be created so that we wouldn't have to deal with it, and it would be something we just wouldn't worry about, immediately go to Rev Tax. So that's our position from the Hotel Association, and hopefully that'll clear up any confusion with the nomenclature.
I think this law has.
State your name, please, Mr. Buck, so sorry.
Paul Savant made this morning at a small meeting in my house. I think this law has some great intentions, but this is going to create more problems than you would ever imagine. And I'll tell you why. Because these transient accommodation brokers, they're not going to do that right now, just for Airbnb type business.
I appreciate that it might be easier. Maybe I can ask the two hoteliers here to explain to us. If a hotel guest comes in and they've prepaid their stay with some travel agency, when they're checking out, do they pay the 11% separately on their own there, or is that part of what they paid for already?
It's already each hotel has a contract between the hotel and the agent. If we don't have a contract with that agent, then we don't accommodate their credit. So we're extending their credit, saying, okay, JTB, you have a credit with me now with this hotel. So whatever collection, we honor your credit. So there's a credit, and then we bill once a month. We bill them. They have a net 30 days to pay. So we get paid for all the whatever taxes and everything will get collected.
So they pay you, and you pay John.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the thing with these small operations is they can collect the 11% separate from what goes to the brokers if you want. But I can guarantee you that I would be pissed if I was checking out after a week in a place in wherever I went to, and as I was leaving, someone told me, you have to give me 11% of the $1,000 that you had already paid for your 1 week stay. They'd have to know, and so that would be the thing. We're trying to figure out, because these people are collecting money already. I mean, the brokers are already collecting the money. It's not so much that they're collecting the taxes. They're keeping 21% in the event that the tax is different from the 11% or the 14% in D.C. or wherever else, and they're ready to make that payment over because they've already collected it, because they've told everybody that they've booked for, that this is your all-inclusive stay.
I understand the intention of it, and certainly it sounds really good. But I've been doing this for almost a year now, and I can honestly tell you, right now it'll work. I noticed many of you are wearing Apple Watches, and you'll know that next year the Apple Watches aren't going to be in style, just like the iPhones are old and nobody uses Motorola anymore. And very quickly, things in the technology world change. And the websites and the traffic, they change even quicker. And a lot of these websites are not US-based. There's a lot of websites that I'm on that you guys have never mentioned. It's going to be very hard to track it on an international scale. The onus should be on the person that's here, the owner, to make sure that those taxes are paid. It sounds like a great solution, but I'm being very honest when I say it's going to create more problems. There's going to be a lot of loopholes. And it'll work right now, but 2 years, 3 years down the line, there are going to be other websites. You're not going to capture that tax revenue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, if I might. First of all, the law doesn't prevent a individual operator like yourself from paying the occupancy tax. You can pay the occupancy tax still. It doesn't mandate that these organizations collect the tax for you and create the relationship. It doesn't mandate that, is my understanding. And your comment relative to how many there may be 15 B&Bs in Guam, but there are probably 150 different units that are being sold. And I'm guessing 95% of them don't pay anything. And so right now we have money that's going down the drain and far from a level playing field against organizations like yours or even mine. And so the effort is simply to facilitate the payment. You know, Airbnb is right now certainly the biggest, latest thing and the most famous of these sites. And if we can create a relationship with them which begins the money flowing in from the 100 or so listings, I think that's a good thing. And, you can never necessarily keep up with technology, certainly true. But this doesn't preclude, it doesn't eliminate the responsibility of an organization like mine from having to pay the occupancy tax. Even if I try and list on a site that can create a relationship, I'm still responsible too at the end of the day. And this kind of begins the solution. I think it's a long-term effort, but this, I think, begins the solution of getting things collected with an organization that is already collecting money for this very purpose. And all it does is allow Rev and Tax to create a official relationship with an organization like this to begin that process.
I guess, the initial problem here, the reason why we're discussing this is because there are unlicensed illegal operators out there. I myself, I don't think it's a level playing field for me. I pay my 11%. These guys don't, and they never will if we don't regulate them. I don't think it's fair to me. I don't think these guys, if they have a loophole around it, then they will get around it. There's already, as I mentioned earlier, on Airbnb, that there are loopholes within it also. There are ways around it. You could get around it. There are people that don't want to pay even the service fees to Airbnb, so they put up their listing. They don't take any booking through Airbnb. They have the customer contact them directly, and then they have them book outside of the Airbnb network. They use it as a marketing tool, basically. So if there are individuals like that already, I don't see that these guys are going to be paying the taxes. If they're already concerned about the 2%, 3% service fees, 11%, they're going to avoid it at all costs.
Yes, Mr. Bradley, and then I'll work with Mr. Camacho.
Okay. I've been fortunate enough in the last 17 years to spend a lot of time in Bali, Indonesia. And in Bali, the vacation rental business is huge. It's so huge that it's created a complete building contractors. There are literally thousands of privately owned vacation rentals. The government in Indonesia, in Bali, had a big problem, exactly the problem that Guam is having now. People are renting units, however, either online or however they would make the connection to their guest, and not paying taxes, not reporting it. Rather than do any of the suggestions that are being suggested here today for Guam, they focused on enforcement. And, I think that the government of Guam has to clarify and, simplify the enforcement issue. The way they did it in Indonesia is they got a bunch of young guys, put them on the computers, and have them search for accommodations in Bali. And when they found an accommodation listed in Bali, they said, let's book it. And then when they saw where that accommodation was, a lot of them don't give you the address. They won't, no pictures, no address, nothing. But once they found that site or found the actual building, they went there and they said, where's your license? Where's your tax records? Why do you have 8 guests staying in your house right now and nothing being recorded? It has been a huge profit center for Indonesia now, where maybe going direct to the agents, to the brokers, that's admirable. But I think that, as Paul said, there's tons of sites. There are tons of ways that you're never going to see these people unless you have a government enforcement division, which isn't, a lot of times the minute I say that with any industry, everybody goes, oh, we're short-handed. All you need to do is have an 18-year-old kid sitting on a computer. And that's what they found in Indonesia. And I think without matching all of these proposals to some sort of enforcement or some sort of investigation by the government to find out what this industry is. It really is. That, you can have Airbnb pay you the percentage, but what about flip key? What about turnkey? What about the sites in the WeChat and China? And, there's more sites and more ways to book a vacation rental than Airbnb. Way more. And so one agreement with one company is not going to solve your problem of collecting all these taxes. I think there should be another avenue employed to, get those taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Camacho. Rodney, you
sorry.
can get a seat up here. You're more than welcome to pull a chair. Mr. Camacho, go ahead.
Yes, one of the things that I want to comment on is that this bill that basically will allow, if passed, allow the brokers to collect on behalf of the government and transmit the 11% to the government. Are we going to require these brokers to identify who are the property owners, the gross rental value, and the amount, the taxable amount, and the 11% tax for each amount that they collect for each owner business? Is that something that we're looking at and saying that Airbnb collected from Guam 20 from 12 whatever businesses, and here's the gross rental value for the month that they collected? Let's say, for example, $100,000 or 50,000, and then they pay 11% of that 50,000, and they list all the names of the businesses on Guam. Is that something that we're looking at, or they're just gonna collect and say we collected on behalf of the Guam, for example, $100,000. Here's your 11% Guam. Is that something that we're looking at, or?
It would seem to me that would be in your agreement, but how do you do it with the hotels?
No, the hotels basically they report because they're the operators, they're the owners.
No, I understand, but they also, the amount that they collect isn't exactly the same. Like the amount that is paid to and the tour packages is a much lower rate than the hotel rack rate. And then you're not getting the 11% from the rack rate or from the amount that they're collecting. They're just saying 11% of whatever it is that they have on the package is what's paid for the room.
It's based on a daily rate, 11% of what the gross rental value of the daily rate you collect, basically. Yeah, the real revenue. So what I'm saying is a hotel it's basically the reporting for their hotel, but when you look at the brokers, they're going to be collecting on a lot of owners. So are we going to do something like the contractors where they basically say, I subcontract all this amount to these people, here's all the contractors? Or is it something that we're looking at, or for the brokers to comply with us? Because if that's the case, we would need to do that, because they would report all these things that they collected on behalf for each owner out there. And I would assume that when the owner actually files the return, they will report what they receive, and they'll get a credit at the bottom saying that, for example, Airbnb paid this $1,000. They'll get a credit. So that's something that is that something that has been done? Okay, so that's what I just want to make clear.
Again, a lot of the reservations come in from people in Korea, people in China, people in Singapore, and there's so many avenues. There's Facebook, there's Craigslist, there's Airbnb, there's Flipkey, there's holiday lettings, and there's 50 other more that I could mention. It's going to be impossible for Rev and Tax to track all of those. And as Techo said earlier, if people wanted to get around it, they could get around it in terms of still getting the reservation but not having it paid through the website. So really the onus should be on the owner to make sure that these are paid. And as Mr. Bradley said earlier, we should make sure that enforcement is good, because we want to make sure everybody does pay their fair share.
People are trying to get around it I agree with that. I think my point, if to clarify, was right now, currently, Airbnb does have a huge market share. Currently, I agree that to a certain degree that we do need to have at least an initial agreement with Airbnb as a start. I think there has to be some type of regulation in place when it comes to tax collection, because there's been way too many cases where I've been hearing from different individuals within the community, illegal operators. They don't pay their tax. They don't, and I don't think it's a level playing field for me and for other legal operators. No wonder we have currently of the 150 listings, how many are licensed? 15? I have no idea. But I think that was the number thrown out before.
Okay. Yeah, 100% enforcement is always the key. But something that I like about this legislation, and to the Vice Speaker's point, is that when people are booking online, they're using trusted sites like Airbnb, and the good feature of Airbnb is there's a rating system on both sides. So you can rate your guest, and the guest can rate the place. To the Vice Speaker's point, when collecting it, I would feel more comfortable if I'm going through Airbnb, and people use Airbnb because it's a trusted tool. If they collected the hot tax, I would feel more comfortable than if I paid through Airbnb, and then at the end of my stay, the homeowner came to me and said, "Oh, well, there's an 11% tax. Pay me $100 in cash for your thing," so I can submit that. And then also for rev and tax, that seems a lot harder to track, because I know Airbnb would provide a very detailed listing to the homeowner and themselves after someone booked. Okay, this is your receipt. It was $100. We collected 11% tax. I'm sure that's all in the computer and would be forwarded to rev and tax for record keeping purposes, and also forwarded to the homeowner so they would have that record as well. So I think using technology, and I always think about at the end is the customer. I'm sure some people would try to get around the system to pay less, but I think a lot of people want to pay through the system because you have the protection, and if you don't get what you want, you can complain to Airbnb. If sometimes I use eBay and sell things, and people will say, "Okay, let's sell this off eBay." Okay, but if you do that, then eBay protections don't protect you. So I think it's a lot of people do try to use the system and use these sites because they are trusted, and there's recourse in case something goes wrong.
I don't always agree with Paul Sablan, but on this issue of hotel occupancy tax, Guam needs to collect it itself. I mean, if you ask Airbnb to collect this tax, you may as well ask Expedia to collect the tax on hotels, and you have an imbalance there, an unfairness, if you will. But the specific reason I wish to speak today is that I have an illegal bed and breakfast operation next to my house. I reported it to Reverend Tax. I reported it to the mayor of Chalampago. People have been to the house. They've been chased away. It is clearly an illegal bed and breakfast operation. Why is this allowed to continue? I mean, why doesn't Reverend Tax ask the police to go down there and do something? Why does this persist? There was someone staying the night before last. I reported it to Senator Tina. I think she's familiar with my views on this. What do you need to do to enforce the law in Guam? Thank you.
I think you have to, I know like with business, even for business licenses for rentals as a realtor, I always tell them they have to have their business license. We don't do anything with our business license. And once our Reverend Tax decided to put a $1,000 fine, if you don't have a business license, then it had more power behind it. It had teeth. We're like, So I think what you were saying about you have to have some kind of authority going in and checking, because I know of people that have told me they collect 11%, and they don't pay it. So that's just an 11% more that they make for themselves, you know? So there's got to be some kind of policing system with a penalty involved, a heavy penalty, 100,000, I don't care. You know, if you're going to run a business, you need to run it properly. And you need to pay it this way, however the law states, because I'm sure we haven't even gotten to other issues like health and safety and insurance.
Thank you.
So, basically, we are addressing those issues. When we get reports, our regulatory compliance are going out and verifying, and it's just there's a lot of them, and we try to tackle, and it's not only B&B, but we have a lot out there that we're looking at, and we even have a task force that actually walk the street to actually not only look for this type, but also to see if people are up to date on their business license, their alcohol license, their tobacco license. So we do a lot of things. So I had a meeting yesterday with my staff on this Airbnb, and they've been out, and they've been at least communicating with the owners. And if they don't have the license, then they're coming in and registering it, whether it's B&B or on a daily rate. So that's what I was told. So it's just it's time consuming, and there's a lot out there, but we do go out and verify.
Thank you. Before we go on to the next bill, I just want to say that the intent of this bill was to make sure we give the authorization to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, but more importantly, not just on the online site of Airbnb. There are other sites, and I want to make it clear for the record that we're going to include all those other online sites that are out there, that this legislation will give Rev and Tax that authority. And as it relates to the intricacies and the enforcement and all that, those can be worked within the agreements. So again, this first draft is to give that authorization to Rev and Tax. We're going to go to draft number 2, and I'll go ahead and, yes, Mr.
I just have one question. On these myriad of other online sites, I know you're giving Rev and Tax the authorization to transact business with them. What happens if they don't want to transact business with the Department of Revenue and Taxation? Do we have a way of blocking them?
Duly noted. Okay.
I suppose if we were going to make sure that we have 100% collection, we'd not start anywhere. This is just trying to start.
Yeah.
I couldn't get them to do 43 hotels. So this is a start. If we don't, we're going to lose all this revenue for sure. And when I book, I try to go to as reputable a site as possible, because otherwise I could end up in a hovel someplace. I want to know that if I pay $200 a night for a 3-bedroom, that it's going to be a nice condominium. But if you try to play offline, you'll find out, that it's next to the dump at Ordot. So you have to be really careful about what. So we're just trying to get as much as possible. If we don't collect and wait until we can figure out how to do it with the 200 and 300 sites that are going to come up, then we'll never start. But we have to start at some place somehow.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Before you go to the next bill, I appreciate the back and forth and how we can understand this issue a little bit better on both sides of the issue. It would seem to me that when the hotel or a B&B owner sets their price for the daily rate, that these GRT and hotel occupancy taxes would already been factored in.
That's correct.
Correct. And so whether the package is sold in Korea or some other place, whatever the hotel charges for that package, whatever that daily rate is, those taxes are already factored in. Sometimes they're it's the cost of doing business, right?
We have a thing called agreed rate, right? From the agreed rate, we tack on the tax and whatever necessary taxes in there. So for the agent themselves, they built it in there already, so they know how much they have to collect from the customer.
So
Yes.
ultimately, who pays the hotel occupancy tax? Who remits that money to revenue tax?
The hotel does.
The hotel does.
Yes.
So
when we collected the money from the agent, we are just flow through.
Well, that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
in this bill, for example, if revenue tax had a statutory agreement with Airbnb, Airbnb would have to remit the tax to revenue tax.
Yes.
So it's kind of a departure from what currently exists, where the owner or the hotel or the B&B owner is responsible to remit the tax to revenue tax. So the whole issue is, how do you hold, in this case, Airbnb responsible if they're collecting the 11%, but they're not remitting it to revenue tax? The business owner is going to be responsible ultimately, because, as Dan Bradley pointed out, there's two taxes that have to be paid.
I was just reading the bill. I think it makes it responsible.
The broker becomes responsible for what he collects. So that's something that I saw there. So in other
Yeah,
words,
you're
if
correct.
the broker collects it and doesn't pay over it, I think it releases the owner from the responsibility if B&B collects the amount.
I know, but if the daily rate has already factored in the GRT and the hotel occupancy tax, the broker is going to pay the owner. Otherwise, you're not going to be doing business with that broker, and so the broker is going to be collecting a daily rate, which the owner already established as the daily rate. That's going to include the GRT and the hotel occupancy tax. So when the owner is paid, that 11% should be in that daily rate. And so now what I'm hearing is that you're going to require the broker to remit the 11% to revenue tax when the broker collects the rate, the daily rate for that tourist, that vacationer, and remits it to the owner of the vacation rental, or it seems to me it's either there's a double taxation, or it seems to me that ultimately, since that amount is covered from the daily rate, that the owner is going to be responsible to pay it, but this thing will make it so that the broker is liable.
Yes, according to the bill,
And I appreciate Senator Tina's approach, because none of these bills have been introduced yet, and she's taken a little bit more time to do roundtables and solicit. And then, because we found that once we introduce a bill, no matter how good the intentions are, all of a sudden people think that's set in stone, and there's inflexibility. But Senator, I just wanted to generate some discussion that if I was a business owner, and I'm not, and I have my daily rate established, I would want to factor in all these costs of doing businesses, all the licenses and fees that are required. And so if I set my daily rate at $100, that's already factoring in the 14%, the BPT and the hotel occupancy tax. And so when I tell these online brokers that this is my daily rate, that my expectation.
If you go into the site, you see that when we say there's a rate of $100, we always note saying plus plus. So we tell them the rate is $100, but there's a tax plus tax at TAT and GRT. So the customer knows exactly, I got to pay 11% at the end. So how much this plus plus is. So it's separated. We got the room revenue, $100. The rest is all flow through as a tax to pay to the tax and revenue tax.
But when the broker pays you, they pay the 100 plus. You get everything.
Right. The JTB or whatever will pay us, and we pay it. Yeah. But that 100 could be a net rate or whatever.
Of course. I mean, but that when you get paid from the package, you get everything, and then you're required to pay it to revenue tax.
Senator, so the hotel occupancy tax, different than the BPT, is a value-added tax, like a sales tax. So you have to show it separately. So you're just collecting it from the customer. So if your rate's $100, you don't build in. You have to show it as a separate. And even if you're a hotel, you're collecting it and then passing it. So I think for Airbnb right now, this would allow them to collect that 11% and then pass it on directly to revenue tax. Right now, there is no, when you sign up, there is no hot tax option on Airbnb. You would just pay the $100.
But instead of passing it to rev and tax, shouldn't they pass it to the business owner, and then the business owner pays rev and tax? And if those hotel occupancy tax aren't being paid, then I appreciate Bart's concern too, is that you always want to level the playing field. And if the business owner is not paying rev and tax, then the rev and tax should go after that establishment and not only maybe suspend them for a year, that they cannot do this kind of business for a year because they didn't comply.
Senator, I think, the playing field that's not level today is that there are so many of these vacation rentals that are advertising on Airbnb and Flipkey, let's say, as really being the two largest that are booking worldwide, and those folks are not registered, largely unregistered for Guam purposes anyway, since we're really in our infancy relative to the proper legislation. They're largely not registered. They're largely unlicensed, certainly uninspected, and so they're not paying anything to anyone but themselves. So Airbnb and Flipkey, both of them, my understanding is, allows you the opportunity for them to, and we're not the only jurisdiction that has this challenge. Obviously, it's a worldwide issue. Horse is already out of the barn. It's not. We're not going to change the industry. We have to adapt to what they're doing. They're already collecting occupancy tax for other locales. We're just one more. They're already doing the documentation. Yeah. I think whatever documentation Rev and Tax needs, and I'm sure it's substantial, I'm sure that Airbnb and Flipkey can provide monthly, whatever information that's necessary and needed, they can do.
No, but I don't agree with the bill. I don't disagree with you. I agree with the bill. But I'm just asking, shouldn't the business owner be the one to ultimately remit that tax to Rev and Tax, and not the online operator?
Yes, but they're not.
Okay, so you want
that's the problem. The problem is that they're not doing it. And so this is a way to take them out of the equation and force anyone who advertises on any of these sites. It's the site will automatically set aside money and automatically send it to Rev and Tax, and we don't have to trust the owner to do it properly.
So let's say the site's not remitting the hotel occupancy tax to Rev and Tax. How would you hold that site accountable?
Basically, we do our investigation, and we go out there. There's a complaint made. We go out there. Basically, we be able to penalize them for not. We catch them. Basically, that there's a report that they've been entertaining, transit throughout the year. Then we go back as far as when they started their business and penalize them and make them pay the hotel occupancy tax as well as the GRT, and that's what we're doing right now.
But how do you enforce that if they're in a foreign country?
I don't understand the question. What's the? I mean,
Mr. Director, you need to catch them in the act to do that?
I mean, obviously.
We have to wait till we see someone checking in, and then we have to call Rev and Tax, and you have to come straight down and
basically, we can't, I guess, regulate everybody out there. I mean, people we encourage voluntary compliance. That's what we normally would do, just like taxis. So basically, if they're operating out there illegally and providing rooms illegally, if we get any notice from outside, basically we do our investigation, and that's how we do that. But for people that are registered, they're ready on our books. We can see if they're filing and paying. That's something that we do normally. Is if we have 10 or 20 of them that are registered, we can actually basically go in and monitor them and see that they're actually collecting the hotel occupancy tax, as well as if they're required to pay the GRT, they pay the GRT.
But first you have to get them registered, inspected.
And that's what we're doing right now.
If they're illegal, none of that is happening. No money is going to the government of Guam, and people are staying in unregulated, uninspected premises.
And that's why they're proposing a stiff penalty on basically if you're operating out there illegally and you get caught, we normally would impose that penalty.
So senators, I would appreciate your focus on getting these businesses regulated in some fashion, or if they're unable to be regulated and licensed, shut down. The hotel, the Airbnb issue, kind of a separate issue to me personally. But this regulation and compliance with the law issue is very important to me. Thank you.
Just Senator Respicio's comment. I think and Tay, back me up on Airbnb. So if you do it all inclusive, say you wanted to include your hot tax in your Airbnb listing, which is what you have to do now. The problem with that is you would be showing, okay, I'm going to charge $100, but in my mind, 11% of that's going to go to pay my hot. But when you report to DRT, it would show that you charged $100 because it's an after tax. So I think this will allow Airbnb to charge at 11%, and so it wouldn't be fair to the homeowner because say they charge $100 and okay, I'm going to say 11% of that is for my hot tax. Although when you get your 1099 from Airbnb at the end of the year, that 11% would be showed as income to you, because it doesn't allow for you to go ahead. It's because it's a value-added tax.
Wait a minute. We gotta make it clear. Hotel occupancy tax is not something that the owner would have to pay GRT on. It's basically collecting it from the occupant. You're working on behalf of the government. So if the gross rental value is $100, what's 11% of $100? $11. So the person would have to collect that $11 and turn it over to the government the following month by the 20th. It doesn't report that income. It's not part of the GRT. It's something that the owner, the operator would have to collect on behalf of the government. And that's something that we need to understand. It's just, the gross rental value, 11% of that would have to be collected from the occupant.
But then based on what Mr. Knight said, couldn't then the owner invoice B&B that way? That this is the base, this is the room rate, this is the GRT rate, this is the hot tax rate? And that's how they itemize it?
No, currently the way it works is we set a certain rate, and there's a daily rate that we have to take the 11% into consideration because there's no separate 11% that we could charge the customer. We take all of that into consideration. We won't send them a bill. They basically wire transfer that into our account. And then what we do with that money is we report what portion of that is income towards the room rate, and then we report that to revenue tax, and we pay 11% tax based on that room rate. That's the current system. But
based on the $100.
That's right.
But when you set your price at $100, you already factored in the
that's
11%,
right.
the 4%.
That's right.
So in this
case, just 11%. Just
okay.
11%.
Okay, well, you factored in the 11%. So in this case, if B&B were to do your online booking, and then so you have $100 that you established as your rate that covers the 11%.
That's right.
Now Airbnb will be required to pay 11%.
So what I think what this is trying to propose is Department of Revenue Tax contracts with companies like Airbnb. Let them know, look, for Guam's jurisdiction, there is an 11% hotel occupancy tax. So you guys as the agent need to collect that 11% directly from the property owner, and then the 89% directly goes to the property owner. So they withhold it, Airbnb withholds it, and then they submit that to Department of Revenue Tax. I think that's what they're proposing. Am I understanding it properly?
Yeah, and then the next step is if Airbnb is not paying it, then Revenue Tax goes after Airbnb.
That's right.
But yet the apartment or the vacation home owner gets to still be in business, although the occupancy tax is not being remitted.
That's right.
Now, how do you think that addresses your concern, Bart, that they're not paying it?
Well, first of all, relative to Airbnb.
Go ahead and talk to the mic so everybody can hear at home.
All right.
Don't we want to go after the owners?
Yeah, well, in this case, I think again, as BJ said, this is a first step.
No, I agree with the bill.
And so
It's just the enforcement part.
Airbnb, at this point, our understanding is Airbnb and Flipkey, which provide these services, have not run into this situation. And as U.S. companies, the law is enforceable, and so
Yeah.
I think it's really, in this case, today, it's a non-issue. Maybe tomorrow, as we continue on throughout the world, it'll be an issue, but for today, it's not an issue.
But this might be an issue for the owners of these vacation rentals and these apartments. I'm just going to speed up a little bit. There's another bill that Senator Barnes drafted regarding the illegal operation of lodging facilities. It says, I mean, basically, if they're not paying the fees, and their license will be suspended for a year. So you're putting the onus on this online B&B or whatever company does these online reservations. In one hand, you're making them responsible to pay the hotel occupancy tax, and there's another bill that was drafted that's being proposed that if those fees aren't being paid, that owner is not going to be able to do business for up to a year. So I just want to make sure that we're just trying to.
Yeah.
And I think the way the bill is written is that where if these contractors or companies like Airbnb are to collect it, they don't remit it, then they will be responsible.
Right.
Not the
right.
property
And I was
owners.
just going to say that. And then I was just going to remind the body here that companies like Airbnb and Flipkey, those are companies that are based with U.S. jurisdictions, and I think that's Phoenix, right, on Boston, and that's under U.S. jurisdiction, subject to the civil tax action. So again, this is not new. We are creating successes and following a template that's already successful in other jurisdictions in the United States. And as in every legislation that gets created and laws that are passed, changes could be made in the future. So we don't have anything that exists today. The recommendation was to make sure that that the government at least recovers what is due to do business on Guam, and they have no problems working into that. Now, the agreements between the Airbnb, Flipkey, and others that are similar to that will have the agreement with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And again, the authorization, because we don't have it in law, is making sure that we give them that authorization. So that's bill number one. Yes.
Another thing is, I think the way these contracts work is, I believe Airbnb collects a certain portion of it, but I think normally, because they do the service of collection, there might be a certain commission. And that's in their interest to collect it, and there is a commission, so I don't think these guys will not be remitting their...
Well, I think the agreements between Rev and Tax and those online companies, those agreements could be worked out, and if it's not, and we see that those folks get that fee, those could also be included in those agreements. And if we have to legislate that, then that can happen moving forward. But we have to start somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. We really have to start somewhere.
But I do know, Madam Chair, that you have the capacity to address these concerns also in this bill at
Yes.
this time. So.
And we can also include that and make those amendments as necessary. So we're on bill number one, and we have 3 more bills to work with. And if we have to continue this roundtable, we're going to do that, because I want to make sure that everybody, we share the input of everybody. Mr. Bradley again?
I'm just curious, and this would probably be directed to Bart. Since the interest of everyone here today is to collect hotel tax, preferably at the time of booking before it goes into the hands of the proprietor, would the hotels be in favor of having Rev Tax make agreements with Expedia and all of that to collect hotel taxes? And bear in mind that this would create parallel systems, because a lot of the bookings for hotels in Guam don't go through U.S. companies. They go through agents that are based in Japan and Korea and stuff like that. And just talk about a level playing field, I'm curious if the hotels would think that's a good idea. Would they want to set up a whole separate accounting system? Would they want the travel agents to to collect their tax and then pay it to the Department of Revenue and Taxation? I think not, and I think it's a good idea that it's not, if that is in fact the answer, because I think that taxes are taxes, and they are collected on individuals or companies, and those companies are ultimately liable to pay those taxes. It is the responsibility of the Department of Revenue and Taxation to in fact make sure that those people who have to pay taxes on collected income do it without involving companies, overseas with different levels of playing, like foreign. Guam is kind of unique. It's not like having the Marriott residence in Phoenix, Arizona. Most of Guam's customers are not from the U.S. They're not booking through Expedia. They're booking through, God knows, they're booking through a Korean travel agent or any one of the 7 Japanese travel agents. So I just think it would open a can of worms, to have a certain portion of the tourism, vacation rentals, or tourists paying for accommodation on Guam, that by doing it privately through private owners, they would be forced to do it differently than the existing hotels do. I think it should be a level playing field. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead, thank you very much, Mr. Bradley. We're going to go ahead and work with draft number 2, and for me, if you can take an act to amend subtitle JJ, sub-item JJ of Section 61103 of Article 1, and to adding a new sub-article 1, a sub-article 1 to Article 1 of all of Chapter 61, Title 21 of the Guam Code annotated. And this is relative to clarifying the definition of a bed and breakfast on Guam, and to provide such requirements as are necessary and proper of their operation. Ladies and gentlemen, the draft measure here outlines and clarifies the definition of the B&B to a private resident or building appurtenant or accessory to a private residence containing 5 or fewer rooms intended or designed to be used, or which are used, rented, or hired out to be occupied, or which are occupied for sleeping purposes, provided that the owner proprietor occupies at least one such room. No home may be licensed as a bed and breakfast whose physical address is the physical address of a sex offender. It also adds a new sub-article which clearly outlines what B&B is, expresses that each must have a business license, is prescribed in the same manner required by existing law, and prescribed a basic framework or accepted conduct within a residential neighborhood. It also provides the Director of the Department of Revenue and Tax the authority to adopt rules and regulations as may be required under the AAA process, which is the Administrative Adjudication Law. And that's the intent of this draft bill. I guess my question to the Department of Revenue and Taxation right now is, what is the current process by which the bed and breakfast operator registers with the department to do business, and how many bed and breakfasts are currently registered with DRT?
I guess the initial process to get a bed and breakfast license starts with the other agencies of Gulf Guam, which is, I guess, land management, Department of Public Works, I guess, and public health. And we're the last of the ones that actually would issue the license after they have complied with all the other agencies. I think, from my understanding, we currently have around maybe 10 to 15 right now that are registered. I just got to go back and make sure for the B&B breakfast. So it really, the process is starts with the other agencies before we actually issue the license. So I'm not too sure if there's anybody here that represents the other agencies for this B&B.
So you don't have a,
No, in other words, the process basically is that they go to a one-stop. They basically clear with all the agencies that are required under the law. I guess they have to clear with land management, public works, I believe, and all the others. After they have met all those requirements, then the application is submitted to our department where we actually issue the license. So I think that's the process that we go through right now in order to get a license for B&B.
okay, and then the number of registered owners,
I
is
believe
there a
it's-
listing that Revenue Tax can provide?
Sure,
Department of Revenue
we
Tax
can. Yeah, I think I
provide
provided
this
last.
committee?
I provided last.
The
time.
updated version, because I
Okay.
know that when we first started, there were so many names that were listed, and quite a number of them didn't have any licenses, and I was informed that there were companies that were coming in to get registered.
Yes, I can get an update and provide that update to you.
Okay. Okay, so I open this to any of the government agencies first. Mr. Nadu, do you have a? Sure. And then land management, I'll have you comment afterwards.
Half day and good morning. My name is Tom Nadeau. I'm the Chief Environmental Health Officer with the Division of Environmental Health of the Guam Department of Public Health. Our offices, for this particular issue, are two statutes that governs this type of operation. One is our hotel motel statute, and other is the eating and drinking law. I can say that, to my knowledge, there's not a single bed and breakfast that's registered with us in terms of there's no sanitary permit that's issued to any bed and breakfast. And by our definition for hotel motel is if you have a accommodation of 4 or more guest rooms, it automatically becomes a / hotel motel by definition. I do know that based on the current definition of bed and breakfast, it says 5 or more. So that threshold for 4 for us would automatically be deemed a hotel. So if you operate a bed and breakfast and it's a commercial business, and if it has 4 or more rooms, they're required to be registered with us to obtain a sanitary permit. Now, if the intent of the this current proposal that we just discussing, the sub-item JJ, which gives the new definition of bed and breakfast, even though it mentions private residence, I wonder if maybe it's important to explicitly mention that it's not defined, it's not part of the hotel motel definition of public health, unless the plan is to have them regulated as a hotel motel, but I don't think that's the intent.
That's not the intent.
Correct. So maybe.
That is not the intent, for
thank
the
you.
record.
Right. So I think it's best maybe, I'm not a lawyer, but granted it says private residence, and we don't regulate private residence, but since there's monetary compensation involved, maybe it's best to include, does not include hotel motel per Chapter 26 of Title 10 GCA, which is our statute.
Duly noted. I will note for the record that based on a couple of businesses that have had the bed and breakfast for more than 3 decades, it's a single dwelling where the proprietor does stay in the house and provides breakfast for their guest. And so, yes, the intent is for that owner to own the home.
Understood. Thank you.
And
And
no
also-
more than 5 rooms.
Yes. And I also like to thank the Senator for including a provision in the page 3 of that proposal about explicitly mentioned that it shall not operate as a food service establishment. I'd like to thank you for that.
Anyone else for draft number 2?
I just want to comment, ma'am, that, at land management, I run the one-stop office for land management's mandates, and we do struggle with this because the law was kind of vague in some of the industry, the activities that are out there that could not be regulated. So that's where we struggled with. And it's clear to me, and I would like to bring that back to my department, that now we're looking at two different industries. We have the Airbnb type industry, and then we have the bed and breakfast industry. So I hear it's being mixed and back and forth in terms of terminology, but clearly there's a separation here, and that's important to us because we need guidance on how to operate these what is the industry called, for the lack of calling it Airbnb, because even the
No, vacation rentals, and that's
vacation,
another.
yes, ma'am. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
So vacation rentals versus bed and
Bed and
breakfasts,
breakfast.
perhaps maybe, Mr. Sablan and his, the folks that do business here on Guam, now you have an avenue or a mandate to cover them. So that we really appreciate.
And
making that distinction.
Airbnb, Marvin, is an on-site.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
so-
I've been asked to go on the line online, but anyway, with respect to this bill, we like to treat it like it was a home occupancy operation. The public health stated that you do have a private residence where you have difficulty trying to regulate it because it's a private residency, but they are now engaged in some commercial activity. And for us, what we're worried about inside as well as outside, the occupancy inside, and how this industry affects the neighborhood, and that's where I come in. Okay, and if everybody recalls, the first time we met here was because of a community outcry, and we need to taper that down. And I submit to your wisdom, to try to nip this, and to really take into account how this industry can and has affected the communities that they exist in, and perhaps maybe the industry that's here on Guam, or that's on island right now, can recognize these effects.
Thank you. I'd also like to note for the record, I didn't acknowledge them earlier, and I apologize. My colleagues that joined me, Senator Tony Adam, Minority Leader, thank you, and Senator Frank Blas, my brother, thank you for joining us this morning. Any other comments on draft 2? Yes, Ms. Maria.
I understand yeah, it is. I understand the initial reason, the initial way they get licensed is by saying they're going to have 5 rooms or less, but that also needs to be policed, I believe. I've had 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath homes turn into 15 rooms, and because the neighborhood said something's going on, you go in there and you go, holy cow, the living rooms turned into 3 different residences. Stay. So just because they get a license, again, it's got to be kind of policed somehow. Number one. Number two. I think, I know he's not involved, this department, but you got to have proper health issues, right? I mean, I don't know. I know it's not food handling, but you got to have proper health issues, as well as insurance. Yeah, so I just want to say, I appreciate what you're saying, but I think there's got to be a policing somehow.
Thank you.
Ma'am, as well, there's a misnomer that land management is an enforcer. We're not enforcers. We have to call the enforcers to come in. When these applications do come, when I say applications, permit, business license applications come in, we take them for face value. And unfortunately, that's what we're stuck with. So perhaps maybe, encouragement through regulatory steps within each agency, like public health. If they're not allowed to go into a private residence, this will be their avenue to go in right now. To see the foods that they're preparing, how they're preparing it, because ultimately the liability, and I don't want to sound corny, but ultimately the liability rests on, on those multiplying industries that are affected by this industry. So
I have some comments about this that I feel very strongly about. So number one, I want to address the insurance issue. Many of the businesses in Guam have a $100,000 general liability insurance. Well, when you book through a site like Airbnb, the guest is protected by $1 million insurance policy. And some of you might look at me doubtfully, but I've had to use it for small things like a guest loses a $50 electronic key, and we have to go to the company and say, hey, there was some damage. We need you to make good on your insurance, and they've done it. The guests are protected that way. The guests are also protected when they book with their credit cards, which is how they book online. They're protected by the insurance from the credit card company and another layer through the Airbnb company. So there's a lot of insurance there. The second issue I want to address is quality. Quality of the accommodations. There's been a lot of disinformation and there's been a lot of fear-mongering about guests coming in and getting taken advantage of. And Mr. DeKnight very, very accurately conveyed that there's a feedback system on these websites where guests are able to rate the host and the hosts are able to rate the guest. And if there's something wrong with it's very self-policing. Now, if there's a large issue, I agree the government should step in. But for the majority of the small things, if a room is dirty, they put that kind of thing up. They say, hey, the room was a little dirty, and then they don't get reservations for the next 3 months. I mean, it's very self-policing. So quality is not a major issue we're worried about because they have that feedback system in place. There are already mechanisms in place to make sure that people are offering quality accommodations. I want to talk about licensure. I've had a license denied by land management. And one of my first applications, I requested to get a condo in Tumon licensed for B&B operation. And they denied my application based upon something that wasn't in the law. And I asked them very clearly, I said, can you please show me where that is in the law? And they said, oh, it's not in the law. We thought it would be a good additional requirement. And there's a climate of fear right now. A lot of these B&B operators are mom and pop operators who have extra rooms in their house. They're not lawyers, they're not doctors, they don't have a lot of money, and they're not the smartest people in the world in terms of, they don't have $100,000 a year jobs. They want to comply with the law, but the agencies have to work with us to make sure that we're compliant. And we're talking about the industry as a whole. I put this handout in front of everyone's table, and in the back, you'll see that GAB, or the Guam Association of B&Bs, would like to encourage the government agencies to help us grow. For many of these people, it's going to be their first time applying for a business license. It's going to be, they're using their home, they're inviting guests into their home, and they may not know all the laws, but they know how to take good care of guests. People on Guam are very hospitable. We want to work together to make sure everyone's licensed. The problem we're running into, and I've heard this from many people, is the agencies that we have to go to get licensed are not friendly. And they're imposing these additional restrictions, and they're making it hard to get licensed. So we want to encourage people to get licensed. We want to make sure everyone pays their taxes, but at the same time, we got to work together to make sure that happens. It can be a win-win for both sides. Unfortunately, with some agencies, it's very contentious.
I think I'd like to just note to Department of Revenue and Taxation as we look at these bills that are coming up, if we had to double up on enforcement and having a division for enforcement, how much do we need to double the enforcement division? And maybe that's a food for thought. I know you probably can't answer that now, but just bring it up so that you can share some answers to me in case we had to look at something to that effect. That's just throwing that out there now for Rev Tax to consider if that division had to be looked at, because this table has brought up enforcement 2, 3, 4 times. Just thought I'd ask.
Yes, we have to address that with our physical team, madam, and I guess it's funding that
Right.
it's always an issue, in every. But we like to get more regulatory into our department and to regulate. This is only a fraction of the portion of what we do out there. We handle alcohol and beverages at the same times, and tobacco and all the other things, the bars and everything. But right now we're only operating, with 4 or 5 that we have now for regulatory. So we're hoping we're addressing it. Maybe at least for the nearest will be the next fiscal year to add more to our regulatory personnel.
Well, work
Yeah.
work on
Okay.
something to that effect. Yes, Deanna.
Thank you, Senator. On this portion, page 3, item D, it talks about no bed and breakfast license shall be held by a corporation, partnership, or a limited liability company or similar entity. And I think your intent was that the property being licensed was that the owner is living
Yeah.
in the house. However, some owners, due to their other businesses, may have that home in not just their own name. It may be in a trust, it might be as a limited liability corporation, and so I think your intent here, really, I understand it, but this would be too limiting for some people that want to. I mean, there are risks involved with having a bed and breakfast, and so they may choose to put this separately so that, it's just their right as a citizen of the U.S. to operate businesses that way. So I'm concerned about that part. I'm also concerned that this only is talking about single-family dwellings, and it does not address vacation rentals as a whole.
Yeah.
That's another one?
Yes,
That's-
another
okay.
one. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So I don't know how the department, any department of the government, is going to be able to address that only 2 adults and two minor children be in each bedroom. I understand the intent, I just don't know how you're going to enforce it. So that's my comment.
I'm sorry, I have another concern.
I've just been told by the senator it's not the intent of the legislature to have bed and breakfast regulated as a hotel. Am I correct?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So we are taking that away.
I'm assuming, like he said, you would have a list of things that a bed and breakfast is going to have to check off to get a license, right? So I just want to make sure that proof of insurance is there, because if your tenant, exactly like you said, if your tenant causes your whole house to be on fire, lose your whole house, your insurance may not pay off because they don't know that you're handling as a business, right? So it has to be insured as a business, right? Or it has to be insured that you're taking in tenants or guests. The other thing on the proof of ownership, it really can't be your mother, your father, your brother's house, because they're going to be held responsible for it. Just make sure that the license is to the owner, who's going to be held ultimately responsible. Yeah, because I've had tenants that have rented out rooms in my rental properties, unbeknownst to me, so, I'm just saying, let's be sure that the licensing check marks are all there.
Okay. Thank you. On draft 2, thank you very much, Maria. On draft 2, we've completed that. We'll go ahead and work with, it's 10 to 11. I have 2 more bills, draft bills. Can we can proceed? Okay. Draft 3, ladies and gentlemen, is an act to add a new sub-Article 2 to Article 1 of Chapter 61, Title 21 of the Guam Code annotated, and this is relative to authorizing short-term vacation rentals on Guam and to provide such requirements as are necessary and proper for their operation. The draft measure defines for the first time under the Guam law short-term vacation rentals. The measure prescribes the manner in which they must be certified to do business, taxed, and regulated. Like its bed and breakfast counterpart, it prescribes a basic framework of standards that must be met to ensure visitor safety and the quality of life in our Guam's neighborhoods. It also provides the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation the authority to adopt rules and regulations as may require under, again, the AAA process, which is the Administrative Adjudication Law. I think my questions to Department of Revenue and Tax, there's no current process by which a vacation rental operator registers with the department to do business or pay the hotel occupancy tax. Is there? There's not. And the other than a count of postings on the sites like Airbnb and others, is there any way to determine the total number of vacation rentals currently operating on Guam right now? Okay. Okay. At this time, again, I will open to the government entities. First, I know that this is your part. Tom, I'll start with public health first.
Thank you very much, Senator. So I guess this will be regulated by Department of Public Health based on the definition.
Vacation
Yes.
rentals.
It's treated like a hotel, and as such, all the requirements must be met per our regulations for governing hotel as in motels. Question I have is, if a owner was to have a single unit of a large building like a condominium, if it doesn't meet the 4 or more room threshold, then it would not be a hotel. However, if you include all the rooms within that one big condominium, let's say, then it would be regulated by a hotel and seems more realistic like a hotel. So is it the intent of the legislature for Department of Public Health to regulate the entire building as a whole, where there are several units, which would equate to 4 or more rooms? Or would it be a single unit within the building, which may have less than 4 or 5, which would not be a hotel? So depending on, I guess, how it's marketed, I guess, or how it's owned, that will determine whether it be a hotel by definition or not. So that's where I'm not quite certain. As I read this real quickly, it doesn't seem to make that distinction. But maybe I'm wrong, but I'm confused as to how this would be regulated if it's a one big giant structure like a building, a condominium or apartment, and each unit has 3 or less rooms, which would not be a hotel, but collectively they all equate to 100-some rooms, I presume. So is it the intent for us to regulate the entire building, the structure, or is it individual unit?
Yeah, it's dependent.
The ownership and how it's marketed,
Yeah,
I guess,
yeah.
would that be?
Maybe we're going to need some help from the realtors on trying to figure out how to do this, because I know when I had my vacation rental, it was handled by my realtor. And I'm trying to figure out how that was done in Hawaii. Maybe some of you have done some business there, and how that's...
I really am not familiar with the Hawaii law, so it's hard for me to answer. But I know, like, if it's a condominium, that is, so we're talking about the vacation rental where the owner isn't staying in the unit. Typically, most condos on Guam are either 2 or 3 bedroom, some 4 bedroom. That I know of, I don't know of any 5. I mean, it's just really rare. So usually 4. However, when an appraisal comes out, it's a 7 to 9 room unit because of the living room, family room, kitchen. Those become rooms. Vacation rentals that I have used usually have per guest number staying in the unit, and then it will say things like 2 beds per bedroom plus living room rollout. or whatever. So the living room could actually count as a room. Those are all like actually hotel or vacation rental questions that realtors, we don't sell real estate that way. We sell a condominium as a living unit with a kitchen, bathrooms, living room, bedrooms. So,
But
yeah,
not
it's-
necessarily for sale. You mean to tell me that on Guam in the last 10 years, none of you have been utilized for short-term rentals, whether or not it's 3 months or 2 months or 1 month?
we,
or-
we market it as that. It's been marketed as 2 bedrooms plus living room. So it's all below the 5.
But you have been using short-term rentals for some time, no?
There are a couple of, in MLS right now, multiple listings, there's 2 units that I'm aware of that have a price of, let's say, $1,050 for the week. So you rent it for a week fully furnished. And I'm not even sure, I know they have a regular rental license. I don't know the status of their license, how they're operating.
Most horizontal property regime condo docs, most of them, not all of them, most of them forbid short-term rentals for this very same reason. And because the parking is assigned and there's all kinds of regulations. Now, there are, like she said, a couple of, because there's no law yet, yeah, there's a couple of agents that are doing vacation rentals, short-term rentals in certain buildings. And there are some buildings that are condotels, which can be condos and they can be hotels where you can do that. You know, so the law is very vague. In Hawaii, like you were saying, I mean, you're not allowed to do that because you have to have a different type of real estate license in order to do short-term rentals. Because again, it involves handling interstate and international money.
But
I think
But
the original question was, do we license the whole building or do we go unit by unit? That would be that answer is unit by unit, not whole building. Even
Unless
if,
the owner owns the whole building.
yeah, they could own, yeah.
But with like the buildup when it was going to be coming, there were lots of businesses that came out and they rented for short term.
Yeah,
I mean, they
short
had-
term was 3-month timeframes, so it wasn't, at that time, that's kind of was the early start of this vacation rental kind of model for Guam, and it was because the request from the end user was, I have X number of people coming, we're only here for this specific time frame for the project, so we don't want to do annual lease agreements because we're not going to be here for that long. What they wanted was to enter into month-to-month rentals, 30 days at a time, and once they came here, perhaps some of them found owners directly that they rented that way from. So that was sort of the precursor to vacation rentals on Guam, yeah, was this request for short-term. Now, new day and age, with new technology and new services worldwide, we are getting more and more short-term rental, meaning a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. That's the new like short-term rental request, along with monthly, 3 months, 6
And
months.
how are you handling it?
Case by case, owner by owner. If the owner is willing to take a 1-month lease and pay whatever the commission is they negotiate with their agent. To me, it's not worth my time. I want them to have another option that I can refer them to so that they can still come here and do their business here. It's not a realtor's goal to work off of 2-week or nightly rentals. That's a tour agency or a bed and breakfast or vacation rental business that is already here. And I know the intent is to try to make licensing available to make all of this legal and fair to all the players. So as realtors, we want to be able to sell properties to people interested in doing this business and have a way for them to do the business legally and pay the right taxes for it.
And so what suggestions would you have on how to be able to like do the safety and health issues?
Have it clear in the law and how to do it, so we can say, here, buy this, 5-bedroom house, because this is what you can do with it. Just follow these rules, and you'll have, a bed and breakfast. I mean, I can show them the benefit of having that, once we know what the rules and regulations are.
I think, again, a bed and breakfast is one
I'm sorry.
needs to.
Yeah, well,
I was
vacation
just
rental,
went to
sorry.
vacation rental,
But I mean,
okay.
it has to be
Thank you.
specified, yeah. Sorry.
And what I was trying to explain to this industry was that with condominiums, and you hit it right on the nail right there, that there are some rules and conditions, regulations, CCRs that these condominium setups have to follow. You say most of them have CCRs. No, they all have CCRs.
Yeah.
And what we're having to do is telling whoever's going to be the potential operators, you got to go back. And we know you own the unit. We know you have a long-term lease with it. We know you're engaged with paying somebody or something for that unit, and you perhaps have every right to utilize that unit as you wish. But that's not necessarily the case with condominiums, because you have a responsibility as an individual owner to what is called your homeowners association.
Right.
Okay, so if you have, let's say, 10 units and you only have 20 parking stalls, and they say parking stall 1 and 2 goes to apartment 1, 2 goes to 3 and 4, so on and so forth, you can't put a bus in there. You can't put a van in there. You're disrupting what people have paid for. They paid for this nice little quiet 10-unit condominium, and for the most part, they won't allow it. And so I think that's where the industry is having a hard time accepting is it's not in law, but it is part of their ownership agreement that can and has been tested in court to trump current law statute. So, covenants. I keep missing that.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. It's the horizontal property regime and the house rules of the different association condominiums. After our last roundtable, I specifically brought it up to the association that I'm a part of at Floripago, and we looked at our rules, and it said that owners cannot rent out their units for less than 30 days. And the reason behind that is the association wants people living there who are tenants, who are usually there, not the vacation rentals, is what it was designed to kind of stop from happening in that one association. But Maria mentioned there are some buildings that are condominium hotel, both, Pia Marine being one of them. That comes to mind immediately, and they do long-term, middle-term, and short-term leases, and there are also owners in that building. So perhaps for the licensing, the person getting the business license would need to check with the association that this is an allowable usage of the unit. A lot of associations also have that no business signs can be put up. And so, there's just some things that keep associations and condominiums and homeowners associations, because some are in gated communities, that they would have covenants and restrictions that would kick in that would prohibit the usage in that way.
If I may, Senator, if this was to be implemented as written for public health, I suspect that how the department would regulate this would be, if you like to liken to a true hotel motel, if you have 4 units or more, it would be a hotel. It'll be similar to like a hotel. They call them rooms, even though each room may have several smaller rooms, I guess, or suites. I'm not sure what they call them. So I would think that if it's a single large structure, condominium apartment, and it has 4 or more units, and thus guest rooms, it would be regulated by us as a hotel motel, unless the legislature feels otherwise, because I can't see how I could regulate individual unit as a hotel motel, like one unit with 5 rooms, which is rare, right, correct, 4 bedrooms. So if it's written as is, I would say the department probably regulated, as I mentioned, a large structure that has 4 units or more, then it would be a hotel motel collectively and treated as such.
But then who would sign off on that?
That's the next question. So who would actually, depending on ownership of that?
The question for the listening audience. Sorry. Who would sign off? The question who would sign off on that, and has to be added to the equation. Mr. Bradley?
Yes, thank you. I'm a little confused why we need a bed and breakfast bill, and then why we need a vacation rental bill. I see that the vacation rental bill has a lot more restrictions that are really not defined, like zoning. Why is the bed and breakfast bill not requires zoning, but I don't know what zoning requirements are going to be in this vacation rental. What restrictions are going to be there? Especially since basically they do the same thing. I don't understand what is the difference between the two then. If I have 4 people coming in,
He runs a bed and breakfast.
right?
It's not someone selling us.
A
A bed and breakfast, by definition, is a home or I think I'm sorry, a single family dwelling.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Where the owner, proprietor, lives there as well,
Right.
and then rents rooms. And by our definition, a local experience
Right.
for the people who come and stay there. And it's a industry which is really a locally based industry in every locale it exists in, to provide additional experience that the institutional larger operation theoretically doesn't provide. That's an argument we can have at another time. Regardless, the idea is that the bed and breakfast, the owner lives there and has people come in as their guests. Single-family rental, a vacation rental is what you do in Hawaii or what you do anywhere else. There's a room online. Oh, I'm going to rent this room. I'm going to go there. I'm going to stay in an apartment in New York City. I'm going to stay in a home on the beach in Hawaii. It's a business. It's a business.
I understand.
That's the difference.
Okay. What zoning requirements are we talking about here? What zoning is going to be required to put vacation rental in? Are you going to be able to put it in an R1? Doesn't say here. That's a biggie. Because, as the gentleman from land management will tell you, it's not a simple process for me to go down and change the zoning on my house.
But is it an allowable use within the zone? It might be like in a single-family home that's on the beach in Mauricio. It could be a allowable use for that as within the zone and could get licensed for that. But a single-family home in the middle of Talo Verde, having to get through that gate, would not.
Right.
Because the homeowners would not want all these other cars coming in and out that they don't know who they are.
No, I'd be talking about a single-family dwelling outside of a gated community. But I'm not sure if rentals...
Well, what are you going to be using it for? It's
Yeah.
going to be a house.
That's right. It's a house, but if
with
I
a kitchen
rent
and
it...
room.
and you rent it, that's what this roundtable is vetting right now. Is
Right.
the use is still the same. It's a house, it's a residential
Okay.
structure, and those by law are permitted in various designations other than M2,
Okay.
heavy industrial.
So an R1,
But
if I
perhaps
wanted
maybe
to
that
do-
could be made clear.
If I
as well,
wanted to do
but-
this outside a gated community with a private residence in an R1 zoned area, I could do that?
I think what's important though is we don't miss the main issue here, which is number one, kind of treating it like a home-based business.
Right.
There is some financial gain to the property owner or the party or whatever they may be.
Sure.
So you want to treat it like a home-based business, and if you look in statute right now, home-based businesses, you can basically do a lot of things in there to include food manufacturing.
Sure.
But you don't cause a consternation to your neighbors.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the bottom line. You don't cause a consternation. Now, Mr. Sablan was talking about this how the industry protects itself within, protects its young. My concern is how it affects the community.
Sure.
Why Mr. Rodney Webb comes to our office and complains. Why Mr. Louis Bustamante comes and complains to my office. Okay, so this is a wonderful exercise so that we can actually get some guidance on how to regulate it. But likewise, make the industry more responsible, because tomorrow you're going to have to bring in somebody else, some new clients. And if you're going to have difficulty doing whatever you need to do to get them, to point B, or to get to Guam and have them experience this, have a wonderful experience, depends upon what you do today. So I don't agree with the way Mr. Bustamante did it when he came out there, which are like, kind of copying everybody. But that was the extent of his resolve. He just had it with these taxi drivers, and so we have to regulate that, and that has to be shared with the industry as well. To have taking that community responsibility. As an example, I used to live. I use this all the time. I used to live next to a bakery, and it was great for the first week. The second week, I had to move.
Yeah.
Okay, because it was just too obnoxious.
Right.
And likewise, anything that happens externally that can be obnoxious, or for that matter, become a hazard or danger to the community, then the responsibilities on both should come from both ends.
See, I'm just concerned that, with my residents, I had looked into doing another business there. And to get zoning approval from land management, I would have to have the approval of everybody within a quarter of a mile, the residences within a quarter of a mile, for me to conduct this business operation. Is that going to be, when you talk about zoning, if I want to apply for a vacation rental and I go to land management, are they going to say, come back with the approval of every resident within a quarter of a mile because this guy didn't want the bakery next door? Who knows? My neighbor might not want me to, my neighbor might hate me. And my neighbor, might block me from doing a vacation rental just because, I have chickens or he has chickens and we complain about them. So I'm really concerned about what this requirement's going to be to get this approval of a business in an area, in a residential.
And for that reason, I agree with you that perhaps maybe the bill can be more explicit.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
Spencer Blamowski, Jonia. Spencer Blamowski, Jonia. My neighbors really love all my guests, and my guests really love all my neighbors. So, it seems kind of like a case-by-case thing. You can't just say it's going to affect every neighborhood out there, because some people might move out of the way and live next to somebody who's operating one, but wants there to be peace and quiet out there, and maybe the guests aren't. And then there's people like in my neighborhood that every time they come over, hey, you got some new people? Yeah, let me meet them. Let me take them around the neighborhood and show them some bananas. We got coconuts around, and everybody loves it. And I think that's one of the things that people don't get at the hotels, and the neighbors get to meet new, nice people that come around as well, and everybody really likes it. So it might be one of the things that, so it's not good in some places, but some places people love it, but that's kind of the same thing with anything. So we can't just kind of say every area is guilty until proven innocent when it's just, it's different for everyone, yeah.
I'm sorry, I just have one other thing that I think you need to drop out of here. It says alcohol use. If I got a vacation rental and they buy a bottle of wine, I think they're going to drink it inside the house.
Or in the backyard.
Or in the backyard. Yeah. So that might be the illegal drugs I can go along with, but I think you should drop the alcohol use as a restriction.
Duly noted.
Can I comment on the zoning
Yeah.
issue? First of all, I think there's a lot of thought, and there's some really great comments that we've heard. The fact that we have 100+ rooms right now and only 2 complaints, and Guam's a small place. I know where Mr. Bustamante and Mr. Webb live, and they live in low-density areas. They have single-family homes. It's what we're not seeing is we're not seeing mass tourism. We're not seeing, 500 people walk into a residence every month. And if you really look and sit down and analyze the numbers, you'll see that we're getting very high quality guests. We're giving them a great experience. But at the same time, we want an opportunity to grow without having these additional burdens of extra taxes. We already have to give away 40% of our money to Airbnb. We already have to pay for taxes. We already have GRT issues. We have supply issues. We have a lot of expenses. And if you look at the amount that we charge per room, per night, it's maybe 70% of what the hotels charge. So we already have all these additional expenses. We screen our guests. I deny people reservations all the time just because they have small children that'll be noisy or other things. We screen it. We're self-policing because we want to make sure that our guests have a great time, but we also want to make sure that our neighbors can live peacefully, because it doesn't help us if our neighbors are complaining to you guys.
Thank you. I really want to comment on the public health issue. I don't have an issue with B&Bs. We don't have an issue with B&Bs. It's a different product. I think the reason why we're here was started by the vacation rental issue. That's the issue. It's not a B&B issue. How you guys got brought into the issue, I don't know. But I think because we didn't have a classification for that issue, for that kind of experience, I have to tell you, I don't buy what you're telling me. But that's not our topic of conversation today. Regardless, from a public health standpoint, I know that there's a classification relative to certain size, as was discussed, 4 rooms or more, right, or fewer than 4. I think that an issue that needs to be considered as we move forward is the owner with 4 locations. We do know, for example, that in the case of Mr. Bustamante, that the owner of that location was also the owner of 3 other locations. And so while his unit may be 3 rooms, when you total up the ownership, it's 12 rooms, and should he be considered as an individual operator with 2 or 3 rooms, or face the kinds of requirements that he would be subject to if he had 5, 10, 20 units, which is really a larger operator. So I think that's I'm not here to make it more difficult, but I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. So, on draft number 3, Mr. Morinaga, you wanted to comment?
Just a short comment.
Sure.
In Hawaii, when it has the same problem with B&B, of course, and also with vacation rental. But for revenue and tax for Oahu and any county, vacation rental was their source of income too for transit accommodation tax. So 180 days or less, they will impose TAT tax. So that's additional revenue. All these years, right, what Bart was saying, and these people weren't paying any tax, only GRT maybe. But sublease it, you have a house, I sublease it from you, rent it from you for $800, but I'm charging every day for the vacation rental, in which I don't have to pay TAT, just a $800 GRT. So anyway, how I figured that out, hey, no. Even that, we consider a short-term transient accommodation, so you pay like anybody else unless you are going to be a permanent resident of state of Hawaii. If you're going to be a permanent resident of Guam, okay, you're exempt from paying TAT, just GT tax or GRT. But, this is a source of income for the government of Guam too, to short-term rental people. Come on, you put in your tax, pay your tax. That's all. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Senator Respicio?
Thank you. I want to suggest, Madam Chair, that since you're dealing with two bills that affect the same chapter of the same title of the same code, that these two bills be combined going forward so that there's no more comments like, how come you're trying to do away with vacation rentals, and then you have to say, oh, that's in another bill. And I think going forward in the legislative process is extremely important, since we're dealing with basically the same thing and trying to clarify this new industry that's emerged, but also since it affects the same chapter, the same title of the same code, I suggest, and I hope there's an agreement, that we combine these two bills as one bill going forward to avoid confusion, to avoid the possibility of one bill getting signed, the other bill getting vetoed, to avoid the possibility of those kinds of things that may happen as a result of these bills being separated.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. I'm going to see Mr. Camacho and then you had your hand up.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The only thing that I wanted to comment on this draft bill is I guess we're going to, assess the hotel occupancy tax, but I guess the language is not, it's left out. Are we also looking at daily rates rather than like for the whole month or for 15 days? Is it going to be based on the daily rates, or if somebody says, okay, you can have my lodging for 30 days at this value, a one-time payment, or
if it's 1 month.
Yeah, one month application or daily rates. That's something that I didn't see. I guess you didn't share the language here yet, so that's something that maybe we want to look at whether visit.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the definition here. The short-term vacation rental occupants and short-term vacation rental units. There's a language here that says it's a residential dwelling unit is provided for lodging for a period of not to exceed 30 consecutive days. What's the definition if it goes beyond that?
You're a resident.
You can vote. You can register with your race, yeah.
And maybe that's a good point because the statute for hotel occupancy is, I think, 90 consecutive days.
90.
90, yes, I think that's the language. So
They wanted to track these potential voters.
But consider, if you come in with ESTA or visa waiver, you're 90 days exempt. So you get to stay here 90 days and still not a resident. You can stay here 29 days and leave. Right? So for visa purpose, they might want to rent for 2 months. So 180 days is 6 months. So
Well, I'm just saying, I've had cases in the past where these are not Asian travelers. They're from Hawaii, and they're employees for contractors and such. And they've come here and they've stayed here for 60 days, 90 days, 120 days with us. How would this bill affect those type of travelers? I'm trying to clarify that, first of all. Does this mean these regulations only apply to less than 30 days? That's the next thing I wanted to just clarify.
We'll go ahead and further work on that and look into that and take the suggestions of today and then further detail that. Okay? Okay.
Okay.
Yes. we
One
can
real
look-
quick thing.
Sure.
I know I read this about your emergency contact, but I think you need to put that emergency contact lives in Guam as opposed to can get here in 2 hours once the director notifies them, because that could be a week.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? Even Hawaii makes it a law.
Okay. We can add that, definitely. Okay, I'm going to tell everybody here that it's 11:30. We have one more draft bill. We'll go ahead and talk about it, and if we need to continue, we'll go ahead and do a second roundtable. Fair enough with everybody? So with that being said, draft number 4, thank you for your patience in staying all morning. It's an act to add a new section 51112 to Chapter 51, Title 18 Guam Code annotated relative to establishing civil penalties for illegal operations of lodging facilities. The draft measure imposes a civil penalty on any facility that advertises the lease or the use of property as a lodging facility or transit visitors without operating without a proper license. If the facility is managed by the owner of the property that the facility is located on, the first offense is a penalty not to exceed $5,000 with a notice to cease operations until the proper licenses are acquired. The second offense, within 1 year of the issuance of said notice to cease operations, shall be fined of not more than $10,000. The owner loses their ability to apply for any business license for a term not to exceed 1 year. For a property that is being managed and used by an operator who's not the owner of the property in which the facility is located on, the operator shall be punished upon conviction with a fine not to exceed $5,000 with a notice to cease operations. The owner of the property will be provided with a notice of illegal activity on their property. The second notice, within 1 year of the first notice, is punishable upon a conviction with a fine not to exceed $10,000. The lodging facility operator shall not be able to apply for any license to conduct business on island for a term of 1 year. The owner of the property shall be given a second notice of illegal operations on their property and shall be punished upon conviction by a fine of not more than $5,000. My question to DRT is, what is the current penalties for operators who rent their homes in residential neighborhoods without the acquired the proper licenses? And number 2 is, what methods does the department use to investigate bed and breakfast operating without proper licenses? I know that question was brought up.
Yeah,
before.
there's general rules basically that apply. I guess the general rule basically for not getting a license, basically there's a penalty of $1 a day, I believe, that basically applies, and until such time the license is renewed or obtained by the owner. But we're also looking at other penalties. It's on. We're also applying other penalties, basically, which is the more stiffer penalty, which is the cash economy penalties, basically, that when we go out there and we catch them without a license or doing business, that we can apply a stiffer penalty. I believe it's $500 or more, I believe, and that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you. First questions, ma'am. Is there a particular fund this monetary penalty goes to? Does it just go to the general fund? I asked Senator because
Signage.
Well, thank you, Senator. I asked Senator because though we have the same government, the DRT, and of course we serve the same people. We too do inspections, investigations, and we do come across sometimes non-permitted facilities. At best, most we can do is refer them to the Attorney General's office or file a complaint with GPD. If we at Public Health have the authority to assess fine as well, I request that maybe that could be transferred to the Environmental Health Fund. Thank you.
Deanna also has another suggestion that could be considered.
Yes, thank you.
Revenue taxes, property, she said, I should have said that first too. Deanna?
Generally, I think most funds, right, go to the better public first. We get a percentage of that also, so. So when we increase it, then we get at least 10%, I believe.
These fees could be really big, and everybody always support it. Yes, this portion of your draft does seem to address when, in fact, it is a tenant of an owner. They've rented a place, whether it's a single-family home or a condo, and they start doing this business without the proper licensing, that the business operator is penalized, as it should be, and then a notice given to the owner, and then I think maybe a time frame for that owner to evict, or like get that stopped so that it no longer happens, and or evict the tenant so that the homeowner is not at risk further. So I like the idea about it. It seems to be addressing a concern that had been brought up. I just think there fairness to the owners of the property, in fairness to them, assuming that they didn't lease out the property with knowing that that was going to happen, they would need time to evict and correct the problem.
Okay. Any other comments? Yeah.
Please go ahead. Okay. A lot of us are small business operators, and a $5,000 fine, that's not so much to a hotel. But to somebody who makes maybe $800 a month renting out a spare room, it's quite a significant chunk. And unfortunately, I think this contributes to a climate of fear that is being perpetuated by certain special business interests. What we really need to do is we need to encourage B&B operators to set up shop and do things the right way. Because that's how we're going to put out a good quality B&B experience. That's how we're going to show them Guam. That's how gentlemen like Spencer over here are going to be able to deliver that high quality experience. But I know of people that want to open up a B&B operation, and they've told me, hey, we're really scared right now because we don't know what the laws are. We heard they're coming down hard. We don't want to do anything because we're scared we're going to get squashed. And instead of putting these huge fines out there, let's keep them where they are. I mean, the fines are the fines, and let's encourage them to get into compliance. Let's increase enforcement. There are advantages to being licensed. There are. You get more experience. You're not afraid of advertising. But measures like this, yeah. Well, you gotta pay taxes anyways. I mean, taxes and death.
Yeah, but I think it just says here without proper licenses. So
Without.
if you read so if you don't have the proper licenses, it'll be 5,000, 10,000.
Yeah, I understand that. Many times, the B&B operators that I run into, and the nice lady that I had with me last time, her name was Mimi. She's getting surgery today because her body's getting old. She'd been running a B&B for 20 years without a license. And she knows how to deliver quality experience. But she's scared of getting a license, and she has one now.
She asked you to say that.
No. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
She's going to need more than surgery if you keep talking.
Yeah. I apologize. But there are a lot of people that are in similar situations where they have extra
I think we
rooms.
just leave it to those without proper licenses will be fine. I think that's better off than you're going to keep on.
But
and then
$5,000.
inadvertently start saying other people's names.
Or
and-
$10,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot.
It is a lot when you don't have the proper licenses to operate. It's just like any other business. If they don't have the proper license to operate, they shouldn't be in business.
We're asking for parity. We're asking for a level playing field.
So is it level playing field when one individual doesn't have a license and you have your license?
I think it's not a level playing field
Okay, then
when
just keep it at that.
I think it's not a level playing field when the penalty for me not being 100% in compliance is $5,000, but for somebody else who's doing a similar business, it's $25 or $50.
Yeah, but it just says without proper licenses. It doesn't say one thing or the other. So and that's why I'm just saying, we're just looking at getting everybody in compliance, getting everyone licensed. I mean, if you don't have a license, you shouldn't be in business. That's just the way it works. If you want to be in business legally, then go and get a business license just like what you did. You went out and did everything properly to get your business license so that you can operate legally here on the island of Guam.
You're right, but we also want to encourage.
Yeah, but we're not encouraging them if we're not going to penalize them for not having a business license. All we're saying is that, okay, you don't have a business license, you can go ahead and operate. But I don't think it's right.
I agree with you, Senator. I just think we should have a proportionate response.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have Spencer speak and then Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Bart. Spencer?
If these things do get passed, or for whatever reason, when all these bills finally come to a close, whatever happens, can we get like all the agencies in one area for like 1 day or 2 days, so that anybody who does need a license, who doesn't know, everybody can just kind of funnel into the same building, stand in line, and the easier it is, more people are going to do it. I know that a lot of people aren't law savvy, or they don't know where to go to find this, or sometimes you get a wrong information from someone who works at the agency who may not know. So I think if there was like a panel set up where people could just kind of move down the line and get everything, or at least get the information they need, it would encourage a lot more people to just go out there and do it when they make it that easy.
And very, very good suggestion and thought, and land management is not here right now, and maybe including that in the one-stop center to work through. That would be a very, very good suggestion.
Yeah, job fair type
Thank
thing
you.
would be great. Yeah.
Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. What we had planned and discussed on several occasions is a series of information sessions to tell people what they need to have. The most galling part of having illegal operators is that there are really no barriers to entry today. That if you have a home, right now you just put it online. You could get registered if you wanted to, but you don't, because I think disrespect for the process. And so all we're trying to do, as Senator Addis said, is get people to follow the law. We will give an opportunity. I think the plan is to provide opportunities for information in the different communities, some of our foreign national communities more actively than others, so that they know what the rules are, so that they know how to get registered and how to get licensed, so that there shouldn't be any excuses. My first inclination was 5,000 and 10,000 was too low, because there really is no reason not to follow the law. I think that's really my point. And so once people know what the rules and regulations are, we're not there yet, but as soon as they know, then we promote that, give people the opportunity to comply, and then hold them accountable.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley, and then I know that Senator Respicio has a comment, unless Deanna has another comment. Okay.
Just in closing, I'd like to remind everyone here, especially the senators and everyone involved in this process. I mentioned earlier that I've spent 17 years going back and forth between Guam and Bali. In 1997, I went to Bali to open a business. And at that time, there were 1 million tourists in Guam and 1 million tourists a year in Bali. Now, there are 7 million tourists a year in Bali and 1 million tourists a year in Guam. And the reason why, I believe, there are two reasons. One is, that has nothing to do with this committee or this legislation, is airlines. Indonesia, all the Asian companies are very, very open, and they're not restricted by the U.S. government's approval of what airline flies into your country. And therefore, a huge market of Southeast Asians are going everywhere in Southeast Asia because it's $100, $200. It's not $200 to fly to Saipan, $800 to fly to Palau. Okay, that's number one. Number two, especially in Bali, the restrictions and the cooperation is, as Paul said, the encouragement from the government, the encouragement from Guam for people to get out and to make it easy for them to do these vacation rentals. Some people say, oh, well, it's going to be bad. It'll take away from the hotels. Well, when you go from 1 million tourists a year to 7 million tourists a year, trust me, everybody's going to get more business. So if you split that, even if you have the B&Bs and the vacation rentals taking half of the revenues, and that's something also you should look at, that is the future, a big portion of the future of people who travel. Senator Cruz, he said he went to San Francisco and he stayed in a B&B, right? That's the way people travel these days. A lot of people do stay in hotels. But Guam only has, what do we say, 15, maybe 50 B&Bs. Definitely not as many hotel rooms. And I think we should encourage, the development of that so that we can increase our tourism industry. I would love it to come here in 2 years and go, I went to Bali in 1997 and there were 1 million tourists and now there's 7 million. And in Guam there were 1 million and now there's 7 million too. I don't know if we need 7 million, but we could use a couple of million more, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator?
I just have a quick comment again on page 3 under collecting fees. Senator, Madam Chair, you started out this roundtable talking about the first bill, which provides for the ability for the revenue and taxation to enter into tax collection agreements, and that this would mean that the online broker will be responsible for remitting the hotel occupancy tax to rev and tax. So here in this language, I'm going to ask you to consider, after collecting fees, maybe it might work if we say, except for non-payment of hotel occupancy taxes where there is an established tax collection agreement with revenue and taxation. So in this case, if there's that agreement, then the owner would not be responsible if in the event those hotel occupancy taxes are not being paid. You want to say that the online broker be responsible? So if the online broker is responsible by the separate bill, if you introduce it and it becomes law, then the owner should not be responsible in this case. Okay. That's correct, Director. That's why I'm saying except for non-payment of hotel occupancy taxes where there is an established tax collection agreement with revenue and taxation. Yeah, okay.
If there's no other comments, I'd like to thank everybody for being here and presenting and staying for over 3 hours. I do want to note that as part of the committee and this work moving forward, that we will keep the committee record open for another 10 days to the listening audience out there. Anybody who would like to submit written testimony in reference to these 4 draft bills, I'd ask that you submit them to 155 Hessler Place, Secotnia, Guam, 96910, or to senator@tinamuñabarnes.com or via facsimile at 472-3400. I'd like to work on these bills, so if you guys have any other added concerns or ideas or resolutions to make these bills a lot stronger and better, please don't hesitate to sending it to us also. I will do the same concept again. Open the record for 10 days. Hopefully we'll get some comments. We'll make the necessary revisions. I hope that everybody signed in and sent to me at least an email, because when we do an updated draft, We will send everything out again to the stakeholders, have them give their input, and then if we need another roundtable, we will do so. So tentative deadline is I'm looking at another 2-3 weeks. I know we're running into budget session and making that our priority for fiscal year 2017, but I'd like to see this work because I do know that we want to start capturing what is not being captured by the island of Guam. So with that being said, I call this roundtable hearing adjourned, and it's 10 till 12. Sainamasi. God bless you guys.